What is up, guys? Again, NotTheWorst here, bringing another Black Desert online video, and today we're taking a look at another silver breakdown. This is a zone that was reworked, or at least partially was, the underground portion of Gyfin Reboot. This is now actually a solo zone that is set up. They have rated it at 300 AP and 380 DP recommendation for it. It's a little bit more challenging than your standard grind zone, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at how this place fares and kind of explain to you how it works. If you do just want to check out what the silver breakdown was for the money we made, you can jump ahead with the timestamps to just check out the charts if you're interested in that. Otherwise, if you want to get kind of an idea of how the place works, then we're going to go through that now. So first up, the drops that exist here are a little bit different than what we're used to. We've added some things that you can get out of this place from when it was just a group zone. We do have Crocodile's Origin. We've got Forest Furies that are going to drop here, some Wind Shards, a lot of Caphras on average. You're going to see a good amount of Blackstones, not quite like Elvia, but they do drop. Forest Breaths are there. Elkar actually drops, which is unique outside of Kratuga up until now that we've seen. We've also got Tungrad, both necks and belts that can drop as well. So that all coming together, we get quite a bit of money if you get a little lucky. The trash loot that drops here is actually worth 25,120 for it, so not too shabby either. Now this place works a little bit different than a typical grind zone. In general, you don't need a rotation. So you're going to have these towers that we're working around with these three sets of mobs here. Or three groups rather. So we have a red one, which is the big dude with the axe. We've got a blue one. It's kind of kneeling down with a sword and board. And then we have a caster, which is in purple, that is kind of floating in the air as well. Each of these can only be aggroed as a group, at least the large person of each one can only be aggroed individually. What does that mean? I can't aggro the purple one, then also drag it over to the red elite one and fight both of them. It's one or the other, and once you kill the elite one, it's going to actually respawn all of them. So trying to kill two at once won't work. You could actually pull some of the smaller mobs up from one elite to the other. Like, it's a little bit more advanced if you're trying to squeeze a little extra trash out of this place, but in general you're just going to use one pack at a time. After you kill them, you can see that we keep picking up these different buffs every time one dies. So depending on which one you kill is which buff you're going to get. When you get that buff, it means you can kill that color mob or elite a whole lot faster than you could originally from when you first started there. So that goes red, blue, purple, red is the circulation that you're going to go from there. So when you kill a red one, you get the blue buff. When you kill a blue one, you get the purple buff. When you kill a purple one, you get the red buff, so on and so forth. So you'll cycle through killing each of those from there. This does have a little bit of a rare drop mechanic for an extra spawn. There is a butcher that does spawn every so often for you, and when it spawns, the other mobs are no longer going to aggro, other than the decimators that you see just kind of wandering around the whole time, doing their own thing with a little bit of extra trash loot for you. Having that decimator spawn, once you kill him, you're going to get an entirely different buff. You'll see this gold buff appear, and once that one is triggered, as soon as the butcher dies, you get this gold buff, and all three of the elites at once are actually going to aggro at this point. This place gets a little dicey depending on your DP and your alertness here. It really doesn't matter how much DP you have if you're not paying attention. You could get dead no matter what. They just deal a lot of damage, and having all three aggro on you at once, if you're not paying attention to their telegraphed moves, it's going to cause a lot of issues. Personally, I like to go for the purple mob when all three aggro right away, just because that one's ranged, so it can hit you from across the room. If you're not paying attention, you're trying to fight the other two, just makes it a little bit easier to go ahead and get them. Once you've killed all three of the large ones, it will despawn the other mobs around it. You will get the trash loot for the smaller version of their mobs. Along with it, decimators, you get the trash loot once you actually kill them. And then at that point, you'll still have the gold buff until you kill one of the next ones. So your choice which one you want to go for, the red one being a little bit tankier than the other two. I usually use my gold buff on the red one. Once we kill red, once again, we're going to get a blue buff, so that gold buff is not going to stay with us anymore. And we're going to rinse and repeat the same cycle. Another mechanic that does happen is you'll see from time to time, there's a larger decimator that's going to spawn, and he is an elite version. It says Despair above his name there. This guy you want to just drag with you to whatever group of mobs, and as soon as you kill him, you're going to have sort of a wave event occurring while you're killing the elite mobs. At this point, you'll have very weak versions of that decimator continue to spawn and come at you. While this is happening, it's just extra trash loot on top. This is where you maybe want to be a little more cognizant of your defense, because although this place isn't going to matter how much DP you have, from the elite version perspective or fighting the butcher, because it's more mechanics based, it is going to matter a little bit here as you have waves of decimators coming at you. And if you do get super lucky, you can actually get it to where you end up with 2 waves at once if the tail end of a wave happens while the very beginning window for another elite decimator spawns. They can overlap for just a little bit, and if you don't quite have enough DP to handle it, it does get a little bit dicey. Personally, my recommendation to do it, 300 is definitely overkill. In fact, the AP is kind of whatever. 281 bracket is fine-ish to do this. And then DP-wise, I mean, bare minimum, you probably want to be in the 350, 360 range. But again, it's really just the higher you get from there, it's really just giving you cushion for if you do want to tank some more hits or be a little bit greedy with how much damage you're dishing out, because other than that, just ignoring the mechanics will get you dead nonetheless. I did actually die here a few times right when I was first learning it for sure, and then I actually had a little bit of an issue with terrain and got pinned again in the corner and forgot that V was a thing in PvE, not just PvP, so I actually ended up dying there. Fortunately, didn't lose any crystals that mattered. So no issues with there, just kind of be aware of it. Did run it at 307, 309, 391, running Kudum and 2 pen Black Stars for that. I actually had level 9 node during the time that we were actually recording the trash loot for the chart. I didn't quite get it to 10 until after we'd completed that, but kind of close enough. Was running Comma Blessing. Of course, my knowledge bonus is 12% and do have 4% off of the pet buff as well. And the stats were done with a tent buff as well as just a standard yellow loot scroll to accompany that. Using Agris here, you could definitely do if you just want to burn through it insanely fast. It's not a huge amount increase, and it gets used up very, very quickly with these mobs, so it's not necessarily an efficient way to use your Agris, but if you're just going to be grinding here for days on end and your Agris is going to overlap, then just use it. Wherever you're grinding, it doesn't really matter much at that point. So there you kind of have a layout of the mechanics of how the place works. Again, don't really need a rotation. There are some finer things as you start to play with this over time and get used to the grind zone. Like I said, you can actually pull the 2 smaller mobs over to one of the elites and then kill the elite from there. And it despawns all of them and gives you the trash loot once the elite is killed. That gets a little difficult on some of the tower spots. Some are closer than others, and some classes are able to do that a bit easier than others. But it's not a huge thing to do if you just want to get in there and try a little bit of elite grinding and getting your money that way. Additionally, you could also just get the decimator spawns to occur. Spend some more time, especially when you have yellow buff, before you use that yellow buff, getting a regular one, and just kind of continuously fight decimators. This is going to increase your trash loot, but be aware your rare drop is going to be a little bit hindered by this, because the large elites are not going to be killed as frequently since you're spending more time killing decimators, picking up more trash loot, but it's a trade-off to pick up a little more money somewhere else. So with those mechanics covered, let's go ahead and get the spreadsheet up and take a look at what kind of money we made here. All right, so we take a look at the spreadsheet, and before we start to dissect this too much, I want to throw a couple of caveats out there. First up, did indeed average about 800 mil per hour. Then you need to take, since we did run this with yellow loot scroll and a tent buff as well, about 50 mil off of the cost of your tent buff there. So we're running about 750 mil on a yellow scroll by itself. Now, next with that, if we look at my biggest hour, happened to be my first one. Right when we started running a tent buff, trying this place out on screen, I just got insanely lucky with really good drops on everything else, in addition to an L-car, a neck, and 2 belts all in the same hour. Just so you know, if this is removed from it, the average comes down pretty significantly just from that 1 hour. It's weighted pretty heavily because we had essentially a god tier hour. So kind of keep that in mind. And then lastly, the amounts of what the rare drops sell for, especially things like Krogdalo Stone and Forest Furies. And then, of course, the bigger ones are going to have some impact. Obviously, your server matters here. So the prices that I had were at the time that I was actually grinding here. This was done before the world drop and loot bonuses that NAEU have right now. I got this data completed prior to that and had the prices done at that time. I'm positive that they've come down and are going to continue to come down from that at the time. And I believe even for EU, you guys have had Forest Furies actually just sit on the marketplace, which is just not a thing in NA. So obviously the value of your rare drops is going to matter. If you want to, you can make a copy of the spreadsheet, which is linked in the description, so that you can plug in your own numbers for it. And then, of course, if you are on a server that's also having these drop rate buffs, obviously those prices are going to tank pretty heavily for the next couple of weeks while we still have that drop bonus, since they are existing. But let's go over the averages that we got on these different items, other than just that peak hour there of 1350, then minus our 50 for our temp buff, 1.3 billion. Again, a god hour. If we don't look at that, we'd have a double belt drop one here and had almost a billion silver there after accounting for a temp buff. So we have a range here of, God hour 1.3, and then bottom end 610, of course, minus our 50 there. So we're talking about 560 mil on a yellow scroll, which is not too bad. This one is a little nicer to get kind of like where your reality is going to be without these rare drops, especially when you're talking about different server prices for these items. And this happened mostly just off of the other items that were dropping. It wasn't an LCAR or anything like that. A lot of other items that all added up to a whole bunch of money from there, and a ton of Caphras. This place ended up averaging 65 Caphras per hour and 44 dust. Notably, though, is the range that actually happened. It wasn't like we're just plugging away at 65 constantly. It was really widespread. So if you take a look, the low end on this was 35, and in fact, you see several 30s, 35, 37, and 38, while doing this in an upper end of 101 Caphras in a single hour. This happens because the large elite dudes can drop between 1 and 5 Caphras each time. So in some cases, they're just not going to drop Caphras, and in some cases, they're just going to continuously drop 4 and 5 at you, and you end up with a ton. Dust is similar. They drop between 1 and 20 dust at a time. You can see the range here. I actually legitimately had an hour with 0 dust drop entirely, just no dust, along with 79 Caphras, and then the high end on the dust, I had 117 paired with 38 Caphras. You see some amount of correlation between these things and your Blackstone, since the large dudes are the big elite dudes are the ones that are dropping this across the board. But that's where these averages come from. Just wanted to point out how widespread those numbers were. Cragdala Stones, we saw roughly 1 per hour, a little bit higher than that on average. About 5 Forest Furies from here, 4 to 5 Forest Furies per hour, which again, at least on NA servers, just instant 24 mil, or you're using it to pair with your LCARs or whatever else you need them for. Wind Shards, we saw about 17.5 per hour on it. Blackstones was also pretty widespread, again, because of how frequently these are dropping from the elite dudes. It was 193.7, which doesn't quite compare with, say, Bloody Monastery or Orcs in terms of just raw Blackstone numbers, but the amount, again, is just very, very, very wide, between 140 and almost 300 at 297 on the first one. It was pretty all over the place, considering it's more than double when you talk about that amount. Killing the elites just the elites themselves, and not trying to pull any extra packs or spending more time on the decimators, just going straight through the elites from that point. Ended up being about 7.2 trash, a little over 7.2 trash per hour. If we'd done this after I kind of like had the mechanics down, I would expect about 7.5. Did push about 8K in the second to last hour there, and was getting pretty comfortable around that number. This is a bit spread out, because the more elite decimators that you get to spawn, the more trash you're just going to end up with regardless. So there's just a little bit of RNG there. Sometimes you get 5, 6 maybe, and sometimes you get 2 or 3. Just kind of luck of the draw on those spawns there. So that does give you some amount of variance. If you really wanted to try hard this, I wouldn't be shocked to see some 9,000 trash numbers just focusing on elites, and not even going just straight decimators, keeping your rare drop amount up a lot higher. Saw 4.7 Forest Breaths here. LCAR, I had 1 drop out of the first 10 hours here. And then just to note, after the loot buffs that have been added for the events on NAEU, I've probably done another 15 to 20 hours since then, and I've had like 7 LCARs drop after that. So definitely some variance there, and obviously an extra 83% drop rate that's on the servers now after doing this data has some pretty good impact. Next, we got almost 1 per hour, and then belts on the nose, 1 every 2 hours, getting 5 throughout that 10-hour period. Although, just to note, they were kind of spread out in chunks, 2, 2, and then 1, rather than having 5 in 5 different hours. So there you have it, the numbers that we got broken down from here. Overall, this place is definitely very good. The XP is one of the best in game for a solo grind spot at all. So if you're looking for maybe a high XP level grind, and trying to get some money, definitely an option there. It's certainly competitive with Elvia Orcs or Bloody Monastery. It gets a little bit less interesting as whatever your current server's market is for some of these items, and a lot less interesting when you have drop rate buffs that are going to plummet, especially accessory prices and things like that for a little while. Elcars are going to go down for a little while, so it's going to make it a little bit less appealing since you have mostly vendor items from like orcs. You're selling your seeds and flames and that sort of thing. They don't get impacted as much by having a market actually destroy that. And this place, although not only reliant on its rare drops, it's obviously the big draw to make these ridiculous money hours. Having a baseline at 560 without rare drops, not too terrible. Kind of depends on, are your Caphras constantly sold out like NAs are or not, and do you need the Caphras because this place brings a ton of it for any grind zone. It's pretty competitive to, I believe, Tauros numbers in Caphras, still going to fall behind Alwyn's Valley, but it's definitely up there. So if you're on that sort of grind, certainly an option. And if you need Forest Furies for whatever reason, there's absolutely no better spot than grinding here. It's a nice pace change than your typical grind. So even if Orcs and Bloody Monastery average a bit on the higher end, especially when you don't have to rely on rare drops like this place does, that can be nicer, but sometimes you don't feel like running in circles and just killing the same mobs the same way, and you want to change the pace. It's definitely an option for you. You want to maybe have to be engaged just a little bit and paying attention to when mobs are going to hit you in the face rather than just blowing through. And because there's no rotations, you're not going to deal with the duel for spot unless somebody just feels like trying to duel you. There's always going to be an open spot available, so that's definitely a pro in this area. So that's my summary on that. There's the numbers for you. Let me know what you guys have been pulling from this spot in there. I've heard some contention about blue scroll versus yellow scroll. There are the baseline trash loot is 1 here, so if you use a blue scroll, the ones that are dropping 1 will still be 1, so keep that in mind. If you're using blues, you typically pull in around 5k with that, so you see about a 50 to 65% increase in trash loot. On the yellow scroll, you're going to yield about 75 mil to 100 mil in extra trash loot money per hour. Of course, non-taxable. So depending on how many loot scrolls you have available, that's going to kind of dictate for you. Is the yellow going to be worth the blue to you? Well, is 100 mil silver worth the loot scroll to you? The only way you're going to answer that is how many do you have, really. If you have a ton, there you go. If you don't, you don't. So go with it whatever way you want to there. Most people are just going for XP, but it's going to be it for this one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you get notifications when new videos do go live. And if you'd like to catch me playing live, there's a link to my Twitch page in the description down below. You can jump on over there, drop a follow so you get notifications for that as well. I do these hours live on the stream, so if you want to see any of the hours that were grinded here, you can head over to the VODs out on the Twitch page and check those out. Those are available. Or if you just want to follow to see what I'm working on next, for the next area, you can get kind of a sneak peek. I covered all of this in the stream actually the day before, so everybody kind of knew where we were at and worked on this all the way up until I think we finished the hours the Sunday before last patch for it, so you get a little bit of a head start on what's coming up next. With that said, that's going to be it for this one. I want to thank everybody for watching, and I will see you next time.